Hey everybody, this is Jen Kleinhens.
And I'm Rob Vose.
And you're listening to another episode of Everybody Hates Your Brand, a podcast where we talk about our experiences in marketing, from customer experience to brand and everything in between. Join us today as we talk about generalist versus specialists. Which one are you and which one should you be?
So yeah, as Jen said in the intro, today's conversation is very much about, from a career perspective, should you be a generalist, i.e. somebody who knows, it's kind of like old-fashioned, but a little about a lot, or should you be a specialist in a particular discipline and go very deep into that discipline? And I think if you look at the trends over the last sort of 10, 15 years, as we've been reading up on this podcast, that there has been a move to more and more specialists. And I think the reason for that is the proliferation of channels that now exists. Everything from, if you've got the old classics, all the way through to obviously social, and then you start to get into things like specifically people who are TikTok people and people, and you've got SEO, and you've got like...
Are there TikTok specialists?
Yes,
I'm sure there are.
Even go there, but yeah. You've got SEO people and PPC people and those kind of things. So there seems to have been this drive to be a specialist. And I would say both of us are specialists.
To one degree or another.
To a degree or another. So my background is in CRM, direct marketing, loyalty, insights. I've said a lot of things there, but they're all in the same ballpark.
Like
using
data-driven.
Exactly.
Type of marketing.
And would you say the same for you at the moment, Jen?
Yes and no. So like early in my career, I was in innovation, which was a little bit of a lot. So working in different like types of technology, things like that, product management, that sort of approach. But since that role, I've basically been customer experience, CRM. So in one way or the other, I would say like mostly data driven.
Gotcha. Because it's an interesting question, I think. So what we're going to do is go through, quite structured, go through the positives and the negatives of being a specialist versus what we perceived negatives being and positives being generalists, because we've not been one, but we know quite a few people who are throughout our career. So one of the things I want to talk about, seeing as we both are specialists, are what we think of the positives of being a specialist. And one of the reasons I work in CRM is because it suits my personality and my outlook. So I was very very lucky when I got to Vodafone as a graduate, because they put you on a grad scheme and you do 4 placements across brand, product marketing, marcoms, the actual end production, and CRM. And I had just come from doing statistics at A level, which I'm not sure what the American equivalent of A levels is, so 16 to 18. And so I had that kind of background. And so the work we were doing there and testing and using statistics to prove significance of those results and what have you really kind of grabbed me and appealed to me much more than, say, brand did, which always felt a little bit more ethereal in terms of the measurement of that.
Yeah, it's a little less evidence-based, which is interesting because, when I got in and went to sort of like ad school and things, I really was more interested in going down that type of path, like you're describing, like a more of a brand path. Yeah. And I found the same thing that you did, which is that because they couldn't really measure it, because effectiveness wasn't something that was being considered as a part of that process, that it really wasn't, it didn't jive with me, because I wanted to create something that was really cool and creative, but that I could measure. And the measurement to me was the exciting part.
What was that? You sent me that article recently, and it was an article about a meeting between the guys from Google early on. Well, not early on, but sort of
eBay, I think.
Yeah.
eBay.
And somebody who's like in the old ad world, and the phrase was, "You're killing the magic," which is kind of this thing about, and the old classic line, "I know which half of my advertising works, just don't know which half it is," which I think is an David Ogilvy statement, but I could be wrong. But that idea that at the time, and this is pre-Les Binet and Peter Field, this is pre-Professor Byron Sharp, Ehrenberg Bass, all that kind of stuff. You're right, it all felt a bit, if the brand awareness went up, that's great, but it was really hard to tie back in any meaningful way. And so I think the key thing to think about is your personality type. If you're not into numbers, if you're not into analytics, if you're not into that stuff and you're more into the more, I don't know what the right word is, maybe humanistic side of it, then CRM, that kind of stuff isn't going to be for you, because what you can't do in CRM is avoid that stuff. I've known people who've tried,
Yeah.
but you can't avoid getting into numbers and data and stuff from that perspective in those particular channels. And I think the same is true of other channels like probably SEO, PPC, some of the affiliate stuff a little bit, those kind of, what do they call them? Performance marketing, however you want to describe those kind of channels. I hate to use the word digital because everything's digital these days, so it's a pointless phrase. But those kind of things, I think you need to have a sense of being comfortable around numbers and analytics.
So I think this is where you'll find the big divide, I think, at the moment, is like I was actually, and I think a lot of the reason why when I went to Brand Center, when I went to advertising school, I thought I was going to land more on the creative side of the fence. Like I wanted to build products and do things like that because I was at that time a little bit afraid of numbers. I mean, really.
Lots of people are.
Well, I mean, and I thought, because like just a little bit of backstory here for the podcast. So I was a classical violinist. That was my job for a long time. So I was in kind of the creative. What's that?
It's so cool that you can say that.
Oh, that's nice.
Like I was a classical violinist.
Well, it's like one of those things. I mean, you do it with all the other people that do it, and it's just like your job that you go to. But I was in that sort of like creative. I went to a performing arts high school for high school. It was also a college. Like I was as into like the creative side of things, I think, as you could be as a person.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought, okay, well, advertising is creativity plus business. But then I started to get in there and kind of got addicted to the feeling or the idea of I could do X and see Y result. So like that's still trippy. Like when I have websites and stuff and I put up content to see like, oh, look at all these, like there's 3 people on your website right now.
Yeah.
What? Like,
it's
that's
easy
crazy.
to get addicted to those numbers as well.
Yeah.
Like you post something on Medium and you're immediately refreshing stats around your story, and I'm terrible at that. Like terrible. It's some sort of
it's fun.
Awful validation.
Yeah.
It's just a whole other podcast, but yeah, and it's certainly a funny one. And I say that there are people who I think have chosen, who I've come across, who've chosen, I think, the wrong discipline, so that they're working in direct marketing or CRM, whatever it is, and they don't want to get involved in statistical analysis, control cells, understanding how big a cell size should be, any of that stuff. They're just interested in the production sort of element of it. And I kind of think you can't, again, this is probably a podcast from the day, but you can't really be a CRM specialist without getting involved in numbers. But we'll come back to that maybe in a future podcast, because I think it's quite an interesting it's an interesting conversation around those kind of disciplines. So I think personality is one. I think the other real positive is it gives you a sort of sense of direction from a development perspective. So, and it gives you the capacity to invest in yourself. I remember having a conversation when I was head of marketing at Game with somebody who was in my CRM team, and we were talking about future development. And I always say about future development, you can only really understand. You need your North Star. You need what do you want to be when you grow up in order to then plan out what you're going to do to get there. And I had 2 people in my team who were like, no, this is what I want to do. This is the specialism that I like. And I said, okay, well, in that case, I would invest. I would invest in the Institute of Direct Marketing, which is a UK institution, which is, as it says, it's built around direct and data-driven marketing. I would invest in either a course or a diploma from them. I would read these books. I would look at this subject. So I would try and invest in these areas. But I had one person who was like, I'm not sure this is what I want to do. And okay, well, in that case, then I wouldn't suggest investing in those things, and I would do something different. And we'll come back to that about how I think young marketers need to move around a little bit. But I think one of the best things I ever did was do the Institute of Direct Marketing Advanced Diploma. Like I still use those lessons to this very day. And I think if you are a specialist and you want to be a specialist, you can invest in those things. And I think that's, in a way, that kind of certainty, I think, is really nice, that you're pushing yourself in one particular direction.
Yeah. I mean, I think too, like I think we'll talk about this a little bit as well, but I think a specialist there's more pressure on you in some ways to evolve, because yes, you'll have a specialty, but you can evolve within that specialty. So for instance, like customer experience, you need to know a little bit about a lot, right? You need to know a little bit about how like mobile products are designed. You need to know a little bit about how like marketing clouds work and,
customer
the technology
experience is such a
side.
catch-all term though.
I'm sorry, what?
Customer experience is such a catch-all Like it covers so many things. As you yourself know, when you look at sort of, if you look at, I mean, I've been looking for jobs recently, and you look at like customer experience postings, and it can be anything from customer service to what you would describe as customer experience. To like, there's so many different variations of what falls under that world.
Yeah, and a lot of people have their own sort of definition on that. But I'll give you a good example. So, just a quick. So the way I would define customer experience is more the way you would define it in somewhere between a brand and like a digital kind of direct agency. So my role at the moment, it encapsulates kind of a lot of things. But if a new experience needs to get invented, so a new experience meaning like a new way, like a new channel, a new sales channel, like a website. We need to create a website. A lot of my job would be the research behind that, customer journey mapping, understanding how to create something. I think the other side of the coin for me mainly is around creative effectiveness. And so more and more it's become about, things like managing data, like being able to, talk that talk. And I have some education in that area, but.
But my point would be, I think, you need to know lots of things as a customer experience person, but the point is because you're a CX person and you're not trying to create TV ads, you are able to focus your learning specific. You're able to be a bit more focused in what you're trying to learn, and you can go deeper into those areas because you need to have more than just a surface understanding of the discipline.
So I would disagree on 2 points. So I think in anything that you do at the moment, any job that you have, even if you're a specialist, you have to evolve your skill set. So if you were someone that didn't evolve your skill set, you'd still, we'd still be talking about like the very baseline customer experience stuff. We wouldn't be talking about digital channels. Like this is what I mean. So as channels sort of evolve and become deeper and there's more tech underneath everything, you have to know the back end and the front end. So you need to evolve what you know. Yeah, because if you stop learning, and this I will say is a trap I have seen many. It's a sticky trap when people go senior in an agency or less so in a client. But when they go senior, they start to manage and they stop doing. They stop learning how to do and they start delegating, which I think is a mistake. Now, the second part to that is, yes, you need to evolve your learning, but I think you also need to sort of, you're gonna stay specialist, but you need to be able to talk about things that touch your specialty. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely, you do. But I think that comes to a kind of what we'll talk about later, which is like a T-shaped marketer, as the phrase goes. But my point is, you don't have to spend. If you're a generalist and you're a quote unquote general marketer, the idea is you know a little about everything, so you understand enough that you can create this composite integrated view of what the marketing plan should be.
Yeah.
If you're a specialist, you have to know more than that. You have to know the real ins and outs of your specific discipline. So, for example, as a CRM person, I have to understand statistical significance and probabilities. I have to understand propensity modeling. I have to understand predictive modeling. I have to understand all those things that a generalist doesn't really need to know. They just need to know, okay, CRM is great for retention, driving action, needs X, Y, and Z, blah, blah, blah. Here's the role it plays. Here's what it does. So I guess what I was trying to say was, if you specialize, you never stop learning. You have the luxury of focusing on a specific area of stuff that you need to learn if you're a specialist. Because if you're a specialist, you don't need to worry about TV and all those things, or I keep using TV, but if TV or outdoor or SEO, it's helpful as you get older, and we'll as you move in your career, and we'll talk about that. I think it's important that you understand a little bit about those channels, but as a specialist, I think you can and you are afforded the luxury to be an expert, because you're supposed to be a bloody expert in your chosen discipline.
Yeah, I guess my point is just, it depends on what your specialty is, because for me, I have to know and understand like how a message would be talked about in TV or VOD or whatever. Because when I'm planning a customer journey or talking about touch points, that is a part of the customer journey. It's in other words, I don't abdicate the responsibility for a channel in which I'm not a specialist, because my specialty is connecting the dots with
it might be that customer experience is a little different.
It's slightly different.
Yeah, because if you're in you know, if you are a brand marketer, what do you care what the CRM team are doing? You know, to a degree. Now that's one of the negatives, I think, of a team of specialists, which is why I think you need generalist marketers who can oversee everything and then kind of go, okay, well, hang on, you two need to play nicely together because you work better together rather than just dealing on your own with your own thing.
Well, it's interesting because, like, I do like to say, and it's something I haven't said in a while, but actually now that we're having this conversation is popping to the top of my mind, which is in customer experience, like you said, part of the challenge is defining what it is. And part of the way I like to talk about what it is to say I'm a generalist among specialists. Now, that's true in an agency. I am a generalist among specialists, but if you compared me to somebody client side, I would be a specialist among generalists, I believe.
Oh, I'm not sure that's true.
No?
No.
I disagree.
Like, having worked at Game, you would absolutely be a generalist or at Vodafone or wherever else I've been.
You
because
think I would be a
team of
generalist on the client side? Again.
Yeah, because you're a team of they're a team of specialists. You have a CRM person, you have an insight person, you have a brand team, you have those kind of things.
Well, so here's the difference though. Now
customer experience encapsulates. The problem is, it's the point we were making earlier. Customer experience encapsulates everything.
Maybe, but now I'm a little confused because, I mean, having been somebody who started not at an agency but in a big client, I mean, you could argue that I was both a specialist and a generalist. Well,
park that because we're going to get to that.
I've blown up your plan. Sorry.
No, that's fine. I think the one thing I will say about being a specialist is if your specialism is in demand, you can make a lot of money.
True. Better be in demand, though.
Exactly. So one of the things that's a negative is that, in your point, you have to stay relevant, in terms of your skill set. But more importantly, try not to pick a specialism that's going to become extinct. So, you know, if you're somebody who is I don't know, I think these used to exist. If you're a direct mail specialist, you know, and direct mail is obviously greatly reduced now, although I think it still has its place in the right mix. But it's gone down dramatically.
Was it ever sexy though? Let's be real.
How dare you?
Was it really?
Yes. Okay. Outbound calling, again, gone down the wayside because of intrusiveness and all those kind of things. So if you were a specialist in those things, maybe you're in a bit of trouble.
It's an interesting one because I think if you're a good... So it's interesting because the skill set, like the channel may have changed, but I feel like the skill set's very similar. So like if you're talking about like writing copy for email funnels or whatever, that's very similar to direct mail.
I would agree with that, but I think I don't disagree that some skills are transferable without question, and I do think there's a lot of email marketers that could have benefited from doing direct mail first.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Because I think some of that discipline goes out the window when it's less than a penny per email versus 50-60p for a piece
I remember
of
spending millions of dollars on you better believe there was a lot of you copy edit a lot more seriously when it costs $3 to send this to a customer if you got to send it to 50 million customers.
Absolutely.
Or whatever.
But let's say you're a printer, you're doing catalogue production. The number of catalogues that people produce is dramatically decreased, and those
That's
kind of
true.
things. So there are certain disciplines you have to be able to foretell if you're a specialist that maybe your specialism is going to be less in demand. But if you are in demand, you're laughing, to a degree. If you are, and there have been certain times, I remember when, CRM and loyalty specialists were massively in demand, because of things like Club Card and Tesco's Club Card and those kind of cool things. Obviously in America you have all the airlines and all that kind of stuff. It's a little bit less so now, I think. But certainly if you're good at what you do as an individual specialist, you can earn a lot of money. But I think the negative to that is that you, as a specialist, you are less likely to become a marketing leader. So a CMO, and a marketing director. And I think it comes down to that idea that if you are a specialist, and I count myself in that area, although I think recently been trying to push out of that a little bit, but as a specialist, you are a tactician. By proxy, because you control a marketing tactic. I control email or CRM or direct marketing, whatever it is. All that is really is a tool in a marketing plan, or should be. And I think a lot of the times it isn't, because I think people don't create integrated marketing plans, and each bit's off doing their own thing in the silos and all that kind of stuff. But if you were doing marketing properly, you would build a marketing strategy and say, here are my objectives for the year, here's my target audience, here's the overall strategy that we're trying to push out. What are the right tools for that job?
I have to tell you, I feel like I'm having an epiphany during this podcast.
Right.
I feel like I came into it as a head of customer experience thinking, oh, I'm a specialist. I work
Yeah, I would say you're not.
in an agency. I consult. I have deep knowledge.
Yeah.
But I think I'm coming out of this podcast.
I think you're the
realizing-
archetypal T-type marketer, and we'll come to what I mean by a T-type marketer in a minute. But I think, well, we'll cover it now, I guess. A T-type marketer is the idea that you have depth in one particular area, but you're able to go across multiple areas. So I think that's what a good CMO or a good marketing director understands the tools at their disposal, whatever tactics and tools those may be, and creates a marketing strategy and understands how those tools are deployed against that. Now, in order to do that, you don't have to be an expert in each individual area. You just have to know what those tools are good for. What job do they perform in the marketing mix that it gets me to hit my objectives? So it might be, I'm trying to drive much higher brand awareness. Okay, well then we need to do less, less CRM, less direct display, less sales promotion stuff, because we're trying to focus on our brand, and we need to focus more on these tools, TV, outdoor, whatever it may be, because they're the tools that are going to deliver the job for us.
Yeah.
So I think if you're going to be at that strategic level, you almost have to have a generalist view of all of your tools that you can deploy at any one time. And it's something I learned recently, going back to game, going as head of CRM and then coming back essentially as a head of marketing, and having to look after areas that I'd never looked after before. You really do have to be a clear sense of what your strategy is and what the right tools are, and understand what each tool is capable of. And I think the point you were making about investing and learning and all that kind of stuff, it's crucial as a specialist, because you are an expert and you need to be seen to be growing as an expert and make sure your expertise doesn't get stale. As a generalist, you still need to invest, because you need to make sure you understand the tools and what they're capable of, and don't get seduced by, I don't know, VR or, some of the latest shiny thing that we marketers like to get taken in by.
What does Mark Ritson call it? Technology porn?
Yeah, tech porn. I mean, I remember once in Australia, when I was was agency side DDB in Sydney, we had to give feedback to the client. And I won't say what client and who it was, but one of the things I said about this client was that he was a digital magpie, which was that he wouldn't see anything through. His eye would get caught by the new thing. Oh, look, these guys doing this. Oh, this. Yeah. I'm like, no, we just need to get into the nuts and bolts of delivering this thing. Let's focus on delivering. It's like, I'm not interested in that.
It's novelty bias.
Novelty bias.
Yeah.
But I like the phrase, and to be, somehow, despite it being anonymous, it got back to him. So that was an interesting conversation.
Does. That's a lesson. Let that be the other lesson of this podcast. Always pretend like the person you're giving feedback to is in the room with you.
Yeah. The way I describe, I think, if you're being a proper marketing director, the best way I can describe it is it's like being a movie director.
Ooh.
So, I came up with this analogy today, so bear with me. A director, it's the director's vision and their strategy about what this thing is, but he or she delegates to a series of experts. A great cinematographer.
Like director of photography does, lighting things.
Lighting, cinematographer, stunt, costume design, all those things. Now, that director will have a hand in approving and looking at all those things, but they aren't, or shouldn't, here's another note for all CMOs out there, don't micromanage, is they shouldn't be in the weeds on each of those individual disciplines. They've hired specialists to do that. The director's job is to bring all those specialists together to create against a particular vision. And I kind of see that to me is a CMO's job, is a marketing director's job, is to do that. Here's the strategy. You guys deliver the tactics that support the strategy. That's how I see, like, and I think it's easier to do that if you become a generalist than if you are because you understand the tools.
I think the other side of that too, like the human side of that, is when you're a specialist, you have a lot of ownership. And I don't mean that to say that generalists don't have ownership, but if you think about, so like there's a YouTuber that we watch called Christian Guzman. And yes, and we're talking about Christian Guzman. Alpha Elite. Yeah, all right. You guys know him on YouTube. We'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah, give us
it's fun.
Christian, share the wealth.
Yeah, well, so basically his whole thing is he's been an entrepreneur for so long. And now he's got this big organization of people that, they have a clothing company, they have like an energy drinks company. And we watch these vlogs and these videos that he does that are very well made. But it's so clear that he has like founder syndrome. He cannot let go of anything. No. I think because when the company was small, he did everything. He was the guy who was in the weeds doing all the stuff. Like I've seen it. I'm sure if any of you have worked in startups, you see it. Like founders have a really hard time letting go because I think once you've gotten to that point of accountability, of ownership with something, it's hard to let it go. But I think
it's your baby. It's your,
But that's the psychological sort of like hurdle I feel like for specialists who want to move up is if you move up, you're going to lose the ability to get your fingerprints all over everything.
Yes.
If you're a good manager, if you're a good leader.
Yeah. And I think it's very easy to slide back into your comfort zone.
Yes.
So as my head of CRM at the game would probably say, I spent more time with them and the insight team and the reward team because I knew it. And there were things I wanted to do and make changes and
well, you're more comfortable.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
Too.
It's like you slide into your comfort zone.
Yeah.
So I think as a generalist, you have more potential to move into a leadership position in terms of an overarching leadership role. Now, I've been head of CRMs and head of data CRM and all that kind of stuff, and I think what I want to do now is then have a look at those things and say, okay, what should you do if you're in X and Y position? And I think the thing I thought about was whether you're early in your career or you're later in your career, because your situation, I think, is more malleable early in your career than it is later in your career and you've already made some decisions.
Yeah.
So if I was starting out today, I would try and move around some specialisms. I would try and understand the toolbox. So one of the things I was very lucky about at Vodafone was that was enforced. I was in a grad scheme that enforced that movement, and it was great. I learned so much. I would try and replicate that as best you can today, at least for a little while, until you then kind of go, either A, I want to continue as a generalist and a general marketer, whatever that might look like, or B, do you know what, I love X, and I'm going to double down on that discipline because that's what I want to do. I don't know if you feel the same, but I would recommend to try, if you can, try out different areas as much. It's very hard. It's hard to go from doing, I don't know, big brands. It depends on the company you're in, I suppose. If you go to Unilever or Procter & Gamble and you're a brand manager, you are going to get exposed to everything. But a lot of the companies that I've worked at that don't have that classical brand manager role anymore. If it's a brand manager, it's a comms brand manager rather than managing the P&L of a brand.
Yeah. I mean,
it's harder to do that, but I do think it is still possible to move around a little bit when you're younger.
I think it's interesting. I think because when you're if you're in a big company, which, I've been sort of in startup land, but have spent most of my career in big old companies or working for or on big old companies. At the individual contributor level, whatever level that might be, manager, senior manager, associate, whatever it is. I take a look at sort of what needs to be in your toolbox. If you were a CMO and you had a CMO's job, what tools would need to be in your toolbox? Would it be brand? In other words, it might be, and brand in some places might mean TV. In other places, like if you're direct to customer, they may not be spending money on TV. They might be spending money on VOD or whatever. If that's one bucket. If email is really, really important to the type of business you're in or you want to be in, that's another bucket. So like if you can spend, I think, and to
Yeah.
be honest with you, it's probably like at the maximum, maybe like 5 areas, depending on what you want to do. If you are working in marketing and you want to be a CEO, I went through this a little bit early in my career.
Don't, if you want to be a CEO, don't get
Well-
into marketing. Become a finance person.
Well, so I was given the opportunity and the advice to go work in operations, go work in call, like, you know, lead a call center and, you know, work in finance. And then, you know, they were basically like, get out of marketing if you want to be a CEO, which, you know, I think is changing a little bit, but
it's true. Yeah, you're right. That's absolutely true.
or if you want to start your own company, you know, and you're working in marketing, maybe it makes sense to go into, I don't know, digital fulfillment or something. But in general, if you're thinking about a marketing track, there's probably, I mean, I haven't really thought about the number of, but it's probably like 4 or 5 different areas.
I think
I would say.
I would also. I think the point is, if you're younger, you have less to lose.
It's also just easier.
It is. You have less to lose in terms of progress and money and those kind of aspects. You probably got less dependence to worry about and all those kind of things as well. But as I say, the other good thing, I think, if you want to do everything, go work for a startup.
Or start your own company.
You know, if you go and work for a big company, they're going to have more specialists than a small company, just because they have more people. So Vodafone had specialist disciplines, whereas if you go and work as a marketing person at a startup, it's probably just you and maybe one other person, and you're going to have to do loads and loads and loads of different stuff. And that's an interesting way also, I think, of understanding what you like.
Yeah, because I think there's 2 ways to think about it too. It's the CV and it's the actual work that you're doing and the skill sets you've got. Because I would say, despite the fact that I purposely have a very, like, I don't know, like a lot of variety on my CV, that I would argue I probably have 3 times as many skills than as the roles I've been in. Do you know what I mean? Like, and I think that's something else to consider as well, is people are going to judge you by your CV. So even if you feel like you're really great at email marketing and brand marketing, if you only have email marketing on your CV, you don't have brand marketing, I think that's something else to consider when you're young.
Absolutely.
Is building.
Yeah, understanding the tools and what they do and showing that you can use.
But I also think it's a demonstration
Yeah.
to people later in your career.
But it's funny because I think if you were to look at CMOs, depending on the brand, but I'm going to say this without any sense of backup or fact.
Hasn't been Googled at all.
Haven't even looked at this. But I would wager most CMOs, and I'm speaking to my fellow CRM, direct marketing, loyalty brethren out there, and brothers and sisters, that most marketing directors and CMOs don't come from a CRM background. For some reason, they come from a brand background. And I think it's a bias around glamour and fanciness, and they're the ones and all that sort of stuff. But little side tip, if you want to become a marketing director, don't necessarily specialise in CRM unless you're going to go and work for somewhere that is completely driven by subscription and what have you. But it's, I would argue your odds are better if you have designs on being a marketing leader to work in the acquisition, more glamorous brand side than in loyalty, retention, CRM, that sort of stuff.
Yeah, and I would argue it depends on the business, because I don't disagree with you. CMOs tend to come from brand, and that's just how it's been.
Yeah.
I would argue part of that is because it's the most visible thing. If you have a Super Bowl ad, everybody can see that ad on TV and go like, "Oh, look, I made them change that word to this word, and it's on the Super Bowl." You know what I mean? It's much easier to point to something like that. Because it gets people talking and you get a lot of like buzz and social media. Like, TV is seen a lot.
Yes.
Versus emails, which I would be super proud that my emails were going to millions and millions of people. Yeah. But it's not like...
It's not sexy. It's not going to win you any Cannes Lions.
Nobody's going up to the CEO's wife at a cocktail party and saying, or husband,
well,
and saying, like, "Oh, I saw that email you guys sent last week. It was awesome."
Yeah, and
no one says that.
I have a little story about that, and then we'll kind of wrap up this particular segment. But when we were at DDB, we used to have all staff meetings. This was before you were there, I think. And people would stand up and share work. And one of my team who was one of my planners, stood up and shared some work where we had shown that for Westpac, which is a big Australian bank, we'd made incremental control groups, the whole 9 yards, millions of dollars, like $5-6 million, I think it was. It was a big number on a particular campaign. And everyone was like, because it was emails and what have you. And then somebody else stood up and said, we've done this campaign, we used Periscope. Remember Periscope?
Oh my God.
We used Periscope and we used all these social media channels and we did all this and we did all that. And there was no measurement in there. There was no, we made loads of money or we did this or we did that or the other. It was just like, yeah, we did all this great. And then the MD stood up and went, yeah, this is exactly the sort of thing we should be doing. I'm like, no, I'm not criticising that MD because they are doing phenomenally well at DDP in Sydney and they're clearly doing an amazing job. But what it showed, I think, the reason I'm making that point is that point you were making. It emphasises that point around the glamour isn't in data and all that sort of stuff. The glamour is in another area, and then therefore that means, as a CMO, people get attracted to that stuff. So, to kind of wrap up this segment, I think, as I say, I'm a specialist. I'm trying to push out of being a specialist, and I'm slightly older, which is the other demographic, just slightly. And it's harder for me to do that. It's harder for me to break out of a box because people mentally put you in a box and your CV puts you in a box. Mm-hmm. So I've been lucky recently to kind of get that head of marketing or head of insight marketing operations, whatever the role was again, that allows me to maybe push a little bit in that direction. But I still think there'd be a lot of people who'd be hesitant to hire me as a marketing director or as a head of marketing, depending on the business type, as you correctly pointed out.
Yeah.
And I do think the older you get, the harder it is. I'm not saying it's impossible, but the harder it is to become a generalist. However, I think you owe it to yourself to try and become what we described earlier, which is that T-type marketer. Because the more you can do that, the more you can understand bigger, more disciplines than your own, you can start to have conversations in your business about, well, hang on a minute. Why are we doing TV separate from this? Why aren't we doing this? Why aren't we doing that? Why isn't this all work together?
Yeah.
And to me, that's the way you start to push into more generalist ways. You do the learning and then you kind of start to push yourself in that direction and it's almost rebrand yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I think in any organization, whether it's a big company or an agency or whatever, the people that rise up tend to be people that make connections. Do you know what I mean? Like, in a world where people are always getting promoted because of their skill set.
I always wanted to do that.
You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
It's not like they're the boss's kid or whatever and they get promoted. In general, if you're promoting on skill set, all things being equal, hopefully, those are the people that tend to rise, is to say like, well, we're doing this over there. Can we connect that to this? Like, It's the people that are kind of like stitching things together at a high level that I think start to move up.
So, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there slightly.
No, you're fine. Go.
So I think to sort of summarize then, if you want to be an MD, if you want to be a marketing director or a CMO, understand your entire toolkit and try and invest in understanding that entire toolkit. And to your point, prove that you can wield the tools with some level of detail. But there is no harm, if you want to be, in being a specialist. And if you don't want to be marketing director and you don't want to be CMO, a lot of people don't, they love this one particular thing, then that's absolutely fine. The key thing is to note that, A, try not to make yourself become extinct, keep evolving, and do try and understand the role of your tool. That sounds wrong. The role of your tactic within the overall marketing plan, because that will make you a better specialist. Is my specialism right for this particular moment? Yes or no? And I think having awareness of that is really important. So be a specialist, but try and build a bit of that T. Don't just have the depth. Try and build a bit of that breadth.
Yeah. And in summary, I would say that I went into this podcast being pretty sure
yes.
I knew exactly what my job was, and now I'm very confused. So why don't we just leave it there?
On that confused bombshell, we'll end this segment.
So that's it for this episode of Everybody Hates Your Brand. We hope you enjoyed it. You can find show notes, resources, and more episodes on our website, everybodyhatesyourbrand.com. But before we go, let's leave on a positive note and we'll share what we're loving right now. Rob, what do you got this week?
Well, in light of what we've been talking about, about specialism and generalism and what have you. I have a talk on YouTube that I think people would find really interesting, from a chap called Professor Mark Ritson. Now, if you're in the UK or you're in Australia, you're in marketing and you do a bit of research, you probably know who Mark Ritson is. He's a professor of marketing, runs a mini MBA program, but he's also a practicing brand consultant.
Curses a lot.
I mean, I consider myself a Ritsonite.
They have names?
Yeah, well, he does now. I think he has a very common sense view of marketing. And he did a talk, I think it was Marketing Week Live, I think it's 2018, but it's fantastic. It's basically his greatest hits. He has certain themes that he likes to hit repetitively. And he kind of skewers what he sees, things that are like a waste of time. Like, he's not a big fan of brand purpose, especially if you can't talk authentically about it. Like marketing's obsession with tech, which we've talked about. This idea that something's always dying in marketing. It's the death of TV, it's the death of this, it's the death of that. It's all just nonsense, really. And he talks about the idea of what makes a great marketer and bringing training back into marketing, where strategy fits in, using the right tool for the job, not being focused on certain channels, the idea of digital being, if you've got digital in front of your name, that's not great. So I would highly recommend looking for that, watching that. We'll put the link in the show notes, but it's absolutely fantastic. Jen, what did you have?
Yes, so I have been reading a book called How to Have a Good Day by Caroline Webb, which doesn't, on the surface, seem like it's related to advertising or marketing, but it is. Basically, it's about how to use behavioral science to literally just have a good day. I think it's interesting to me, but it's also very applicable for consumer behavior. If you want to learn some really actionable sort of behavioral science tactics, principles, research, and also learning how people make decisions and how they sort of create habits and stick to those habits or change their habits and all of that. So I'm finding it very interesting, even though it's not directly related to marketing.
No, I think anything behavioral science helps understanding people. That's our job, isn't it, to a large degree?
This is true. Cool. Well, you did it. You've wasted another perfectly good half an hour with Rob and Jen and the Everybody Hates Your Brand podcast. Again, you can find us on everybodyhatesyourbrand.com and your podcast platform of choice. Have a good week.
Bye.